Hello, this is Richard, Finding Genius podcast, now a part of the Finding Genius Foundation. And I've got a very interesting guest. Her name is Sandy Rosenthal. She's an author from New Orleans. She just came out with a book recently called Words Whispered in Water. She was there during Hurricane Katrina and affected by it, as were countless thousands and hundreds of thousands of people in New Orleans. So firsthand account is what we're going to hear about what went on. And it appears that the Army Corps of Engineers might have had a hand in what went on in Hurricane Katrina. It wasn't just, an act of God that caused all this. And Sandy will get into the nuances of that. So I just want to welcome her. So Sandy, thanks for coming.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Well, if you would tell me about your life in New Orleans right up until the time that the storm came, what was going on, and just give me a brief background.
Well, I think the most important thing for your listeners is that I had no special training. I didn't even really know where our levees were here in the city. I, like most people, took protection from the federal government for granted, just like I assume a federal bridge on a federal highway won't fall down if I drive my car across it. So Hurricane Katrina came along. We did evacuate for 3 weeks, which I think put me in a very special place where I had the opportunity to watch from afar with three weeks of belongings and my checkbook and everything. And I was able to watch the disaster unfold. I watched the disastrous response to the flooding, and then I watched the people responsible try to cover that up. And it's because of that space that I was in, a relatively unusual space. So that explains I was not in the city when Hurricane Katrina arrived. I was safely evacuated in another city about 3 hours away in Jackson, Mississippi.
So when the hurricane first hit and things happened, at what point did you realize, oh my God, this is far worse than I could have ever imagined? And where does the story go from there?
Realized as the the radio reports filtered through one by one, it became clear that the levees had broken and that the city was filling up with water. And we did not learn that until 24 hours after the storm had passed through the city of New Orleans. It was a traumatic moment. I didn't know anything yet. And we assumed the worst, of course. We assumed our house was flooded. It did not. We assumed our business was flooded. It was not. We were one of the lucky ones. We live in an area of the city that's actually well above sea level, 6 feet above. That's another thing that we didn't know when the levees broke. So we realized it 24 hours later, but it would take another, I would say, 6 weeks before I began to figure out that this was not a case of monster storm. It was not a case of city below sea level. 50% of New Orleans is well above sea level, and definitely not a case of anything that we, the locals, did or did not do. It became apparent about 6 weeks later that this was engineering failure on the part of the federal government.
At what point did you realize that you were being the citizens in New Orleans were being thrown under the bus? And what did that take form like? What did it look like? What came out in the news or what was said where you realized, oh my God, they're blaming us?
Right. Well, the news reports from the very beginning definitely blamed the people of New Orleans. The storyline went monster storm, city below the sea, and they're all corrupt down there. You name it, I heard it. That we'd stolen the money and spent it on Mardi Gras. That local officials were not paying attention to levee maintenance. You name it, we heard it. The list goes on and on. Okay. And we could talk for an hour on all of the ways that the people of New Orleans were thrown under the bus. The key moment, the epiphany moment, the eureka moment was when I managed to get a hold of a report before a congressional hearing 4 weeks after the storm, just 4 weeks. Keep in mind, I was one of the few people that wasn't trying to figure out where am I going to live? How am I going to earn money? And where are my kids going to go to school? I was one of the very few in that position. And I got a hold of that report, and it said right there on page 3 that the Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for the design and construction of the levees in New Orleans, and the local officials are responsible for maintenance.